It seems like struggles with pornography get most of the airtime these days since it is so available in modern times. However, drug abuse and substance addiction is growing at shocking rates. As a church leader, you need to be prepared. We have a library full of resources focused on this topic. The presentation I would recommend you start with is Joseph Grenny's presentation about what we can learn from Captain Moroni to help our loved ones overcome struggles with drugs and alcohol. His story of how he loved his son through his addiction is powerful and redemptive. You can listen to this presentation in the Recovering Saints library by going to leadingsaints.org/14. Put your information in there and that will give you 14 days at no cost. I made it easier for you and put the link in the show notes, or you can go to leadingsaints.org/14. The following episode is a throwback episode, one that was published previously and was extremely popular. To see the details of when this was originally published, see the show notes. Enjoy this throwback episode. Welcome back to the Leading Saints podcast. My name is Kurt Frankham, and I'll be your host. Now, if you're new to the Leading Saints podcast, this is an organization where we produce a podcast, and that podcast is always about leadership in the context of being a better Latter-day Saint leader. So if you're new, we welcome you, and we hope that you'll share with friends, and you'll keep listening and listen to many other episodes that you can jump into. Plenty of content to peruse. Now, in this episode, it is a unique episode because I interview Frank Layden. Now, Frank Layden was the coach of the Utah Jazz from 1981 to 1989. He was instrumental in drafting and signing franchise mainstays like John Stockton and Karl Malone to the club. In 1984, Layden was awarded the NBA's Coach of the Year. The same season, he also won the NBA's Executive of the Year and most recently received the 2019 Chuck Daly Lifetime Achievement Award. For those of you who have lived in Utah, you know that he is a gem in our community. An Irish Catholic from Brooklyn, New York, Coach Layden came to Utah unexpectedly when the New Orleans Jazz became the Utah Jazz. He fell in love with the area and community and now lives in downtown Salt Lake City with his wife, Barbara. Now, though Coach Layden doesn't have a Latter-day Saint background, I jumped at the opportunity to interview him because he's such a unique leader in the Latter-day Saint Utah community. He shares some remarkable leadership principles in this interview that you got to pay close attention to, and they all apply to coaching, obviously, but many of them, if not all of them, apply to leading as a Latter-day Saint. So Coach Layden jumped right into a story when I handed him the mic, so I hit record as quickly as I can, so you're going to jump into this conversation as it goes. Now, stay tuned till the end of the interview where I'll share some of my takeaway and some of the principles that really stood out to me in this interview that I thought were genius approaches to leadership. So here is my interview with Coach Frank Layden, former Utah Jazz head coach and one of Utah's favorite Catholics.
This is what Mr. Mack said one time. The guy that builds the ladders, you ever see on TV, the ladders? Yeah. Is that his name? He has the ladders, the crazy ladders. Well, we saw him put on a little exhibition. We were at some kind of an outing or something like that. And after it was over, we got introduced and everything. And we go through. Mr. Mack was standing next to me. And he said, this guy, whoever he was straight. We shook hands and everything. He says, oh, I've heard you speak and I know what you've done and everything. He says, have you thought about joining the church? So I said, well, I thought I was in the church, but anyway, I haven't really given much consideration. And Mr. Mack says to the guy, leave him alone. He says, he's more help to us outside the church than in it.
Wow.
He goes, Frank Layden's a friend of ours.
Nice.
He says, and he sells us, he says, more than if he were in the church.
Wow.
And I said, that was quite a compliment, I thought,
Yeah, for sure.
And then, of course, President Monson said one time when I was speaking at a dinner, after it was over, I kidded about needing a green card to get into Provo and, what have you. Being the honor code was being administered to me. I didn't even know it. But anyway, when I got over, he said, and I thought this was wonderful. He said, Frank Layden is one of our treasures. He says, because he makes us laugh at ourselves.
Oh, that's great.
President Monson.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow. And I bet you didn't expect yourself to end up in Utah, right?
No. In fact, I tell my friends back in Brooklyn that I'm here in the witness protection program.
It's working, huh?
I mean, how do you get to Utah? I thought Utah was in Europe when I was growing up. Are you kidding me?
Nice.
Holy cow.
And
But here I am.
so for those, I mean, they may not know a little bit of the history. I mean, you were first hired by the New Orleans Jazz, right?
Yes. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York, streets of New York, single parent. My mother died when I was born in my childbirth.
Oh, wow.
So anyway, I remember my coaches early on saying, if you get good grades and you play ball or something, you may be able to get a scholarship to college. Now, if I don't get a scholarship to college, maybe I'd go some other way. But because in New York City, you can go to school free. I mean, you can go to City College in New York, Brooklyn College, all those schools. I said, but playing ball sounded good too. And that's what happened to me. You know, I had coaches who believed in me and worked with me. And eventually I got a scholarship to college and I got into coaching and teaching. For 10 years, I was a school teacher.
What'd you teach?
Duty, bus to history.
History.
I was a history teacher. Yeah. 10 years.
Wow.
I'd been in the service. I'd been in the ROTC in the Korean War and what have you as an officer. And when I got out, I didn't know what I was going to do. And my college coach says, you should go into coaching. You should work with kids. And so that's how I started. So then I went from there to a small college, then eventually from a small college, Dowling College on Long Island, to St. John's, which was a big college. And from there to eventually to the Niagara University, where I played and coached, and then to the Atlanta Hawks as an assistant coach. And I left the Hawks to go with the New Orleans Jazz. And before I blinked, all right, here I was moving to Utah. Because at that time, Wendell Ashton, who was the publisher of the Deseret News, was working very hard after the loss of the Stars here and the ABA team to get another team here, an NBA team preferably. And Sam Battistone was a member of the church. He was a LDS, and he had children at BYU, and they talked and what have you, and finally they persuaded him to come to Salt Lake City. And the whole idea was to come, play here, establish ourselves, and then to build an arena, which eventually happened down the line. So, you know, I came home to Barbara. I'm going to never forget, and I told her, is that I said, well, I've got good news and bad news. She says, what's the good news? I said, the good news is I got the job at the Jazz. She said, well, that's great. So what's the bad news? I said, we're moving to Salt Lake City, Utah. And she said, where's that? In England?
So, and what was your perception of Utah at this point in your life?
I'd been here.
Yeah.
I knew Jack Gardner and I knew Stan Watts. I had a relationship with Stan Watts through my college coach. They were in the Navy together and they knew each other and they had great respect for one another. And I had met him and we had played. Actually, we played against that great team, that great BYU team in Madison Square Garden. I think, you know, who did they have? Roland Minson, and who was Miss America's brother was Mel Hutchins, and there was a great team on the NIT. But anyway, so, and then after I had coached Niagara, when I was coaching at Niagara, we played BYU. We played in the Marriott Center, and we also played up in Buffalo. Yeah, which was wonderful. You know, the LDS people were coming from everywhere to see their team play, to see them lose. By the way, but that no, I'm not kidding. We exchanged losses. Right.
So did you have, as far as you had one perception of Utah, but any interaction with Mormons before coming to Utah?
No, only knocking on my door and and inviting me to things. I give them a sandwich and send them on their way.
Yeah. Well, good.
Yeah.
Good.
You know, one of the things early in my career, I went to the governor, and I think it was Governor Bangerter at the time. It might not have been. It might have been Matheson. But anyway, I said, you know what? You should use me to, like they do Telly Savalas. Remember the ads when Telly Savalas used to be on? He used to sell Las Vegas. He used to say, I'm Telly Savalas, and I live in Las Vegas. It is a great place for families to move, and because everybody's afraid to move to Las Vegas because of the gambling and stuff like that. And he used to say, and it's a great place to raise kids and all that. So I said, you know what? I should go out and say, I'm Frank Layden, You all know me coaching the Jazz. Well, I'm from Brooklyn, New York, but my home now is Salt Lake City, Utah, and this is a great place to bring. And everybody thought that was a great idea, as to some people. But there's a lot of denial here, and a lot of people said, "What's the problem?" Nobody knows the difference, something like that. So anyway, that was it. But no, I get along with people.
Yeah,
and so I find that by going forward and saying, "Where can I help?" And that's how I think the Jazz, when we weren't very good, what do we have to sell? We had to sell service. We had to sell the idea that we were here, that we were going to make this community better. We weren't going to hurt college basketball. I mean, with the great teams you had here, the Liddell Andersons and the Jack Gardners and those kind of guys coaching here. So, we came in with the idea. I said, one of the first things I did, I went to the school activities groups and said, look at what can we do to make sports in Utah better? And they said, well, you could help us by not playing on Friday nights. I said, we can do that. Yeah, sure. We'll help that. And we put on clinics, coaches clinics, kids clinics. We started junior jazz.
Oh yeah.
By the way, the biggest thing in the whole country.
Yeah, Little League.
It was like Little League basketball. And we had over 110,000 kids playing. 110,000.
I was one of those kids
in 5 states. Yeah. And in fact, it's a model now for the NBA.
Yeah.
To use. And then the idea that I'd go out and speak and meet and, and whether it was, to me, being Irish Catholic Democrat, I know I could get my group and meet in a phone booth. But you know what? People stand up and listen. People are willing to share. And that's what we tried to do.
Yeah.
And I've always believed in that. I always felt I could get along with people and try to. I always knew this. I always knew who the home team was here.
Yeah.
All right. And I always knew it was a club I couldn't get into. So I tried to obey the rules, live a good life, and bring up a family here.
Sure.
And add to the culture that was already here, and hopefully it was in a good way.
Yeah, and it has been. I mean,
well, I think one of the things that's happened is being honored by BYU.
Yeah.
All right, the business society having their dinners, and then I lit the Y.
Yeah.
At a game one year, I had Lavelle had me come in and speak to the team before a game one day. Last year. Barbara and I were honored at a BYU basketball game, in which they were playing my alma mater, Niagara, at the Marriott Center. And so, we've tried to keep up a relationship. There was no jealousy.
Yeah.
I always felt there was room for everybody. There's no bad cities or bad states. There's only bad teams. If you're good, you'll make it. There's room for everybody.
Yeah.
And I always think of this. The year 1984. What does that mean to the people that are LDS that have a connection with BYU?
That was the national championship.
The national championship football team.
That's right.
1984 was also the first time the Jazz made the playoffs. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was a big year for both.
Yeah, for sure.
There was room for everybody.
Yeah.
And so I think if you go about it that way, you'll be just fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So going back to your career, I mean, as a player, did you always know you'd end up in coaching? I mean, was that the goal?
No. You know why? Because I always saw coaches as kind of belabored. They never seemed to be paid enough. They always were being, you win, you're fine, you lose. You're famous for a little while. I admired coaches, and I knew some of the great ones. I'm very fortunate to say that I considered Johnny Wooden a close friend, not just a friend.
Really?
Wow. I knew Vince Lombardi, and crossing over into different sports. Red Holzman was a good friend. We played for the same high school coach. I had a wonderful high school coach, Mr. Drucker. And by the way, I still call him Mr. Drucker. I signed him to a one-day contract so he could sit on the bench with the Jazz and be assistant coach in the NBA for a day. And Mr. Gallagher, my high school my college coach, had a wonderful influence on me. And we always seemed to have room. When we didn't have we weren't poor when we were kids. We just didn't have any money. But we always had spikes and gloves and whatever we needed.
Yeah.
To progress, to play. And so moving here, and I don't say this in a corny way. I think there was something spiritual about it.
Really.
I think we came out here for a reason. And we could live anywhere in the world now, my Barbara and I, but we chose to live here, and our children have lived here. But I really think that we're here because we add a certain balance.
Yeah.
To this community.
Yeah, it's been a great balance, a needed balance for sure. So when you did come out here, did you feel like you were getting a break? I mean, this was your first NBA professional head coaching position.
I wasn't sure because I had the worst team in the history of basketball.
Yeah.
I mean, nobody could win with this Jazz.
So where do you start with that?
The first coach was Tom Nasulke, and he eventually got fired. He was a good coach, a very good coach, but nobody could win. We just didn't have any players. It took a little time, and you know what? You can work hard at scouting and looking at players, but everybody's doing that. You have to get a little lucky, and all of a sudden, certain pieces fell into. And I'm not talking about Malone and Stockton. That's
before them, yeah.
But it was how about getting a guy like Bobby Hansen or Ricky Green, who had been in the minor leagues for 5 years, had never really. Every time he came to the NBA, he didn't make it. But we were a team that was hungry for help, and he turned out to be just right. He was great. I thought he was the first great player we really got. And then Mark Eaton, who never played in college, never played in high school. He sat on the bench at UCLA. He was great in the team picture. Turned out to be an all-star with us.
Yeah, he was.
And then Jerry Sloan, who had coached at Chicago and got fired there, came with us and coached his way into the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And so, it's you got to get lucky. First you got to get the opportunity to get it. And there's only 30 jobs. So you got to make the most of them. But there should be service involved. I really believe that there's a couple of things. I think the Peace Corps, that was one of our most successful things in selling American standards around the world. What good, I wonder, is done by the missionaries, not just in conversion to the Mormon Church or bringing new people into the Mormon Church, into the LDS Church, but what about how people see them, these clean-cut youngsters, going around the world. They see these as healthy American kids trying to do something good. And it's not, I knew some young ladies from BYU that were on the mission, and they were giving injections, inoculations and wrapping bandages and helping in clinics and stuff around the world. And that stuff is what we need. We need to reinsert ourselves in terms of service. And I always felt this way, even when I was coaching in the pros, that I wanted the players to be better intellectually when they left us than they were when they came with us. And I think they were. I think in most cases they were.
How did you go about doing that or installing
by instituting certain things that hadn't been done before. We started a wives club. The wives are lonely. Their husbands are away. Their husbands are the big stars. They're married when they're young kids. And so we started a wives club and gave them some duties, such as putting on shows, clothing, modeling,
fashion
shows, and raising money. And then the Christmas tree. We got into the Christmas tree business, and we won the award one year. We had the trees all covered with shoes and shirts of the players, and then some of the young ladies, we'd ask them in interviews, what were you going to do before you got married? Oh, I wanted to be a nurse. Well, why don't you be a nurse? I'll give you an example. Adrian Danley's wife came. She says, I wanted to be a lawyer. Well, why didn't you go to law school? She went to law school. She's a lawyer now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so in other words, they had dreams that they didn't necessarily have to give them up because they got married. They could still go on with their lives. And so, and we took care of the kids. Then we started a chapel service. After these guys get out of school, away from their families, everything else, their mothers, they didn't go to church anymore. So, we got the Reverend Franz Davis.
Oh, yeah.
All right. And we had another a minister in town by the name of Jerry Lewis, of all names, but he was a great guy. He's died recently, but a wonderful Christian gentleman. And we had services on once a week, and we invited the wives to come. We invited the other teams to join us. Sometimes players were suspicious of why we would do that. They thought we were softening their teams up, but sometimes players would come from other teams. We also gave a bonus to players who finished their college degrees. A lot of them quit college early, or they don't finish their degrees before they get out and they go into the pros. And there's a lot of satisfaction. I can remember Mrs. Danley saying the proudest time in her life wasn't when her son was on the all-star team, or he was captain of the Olympic team that won a gold medal. He won the national scoring championship in college. He won it in the NBA. It was when he walked down the aisle at Notre Dame and got his diploma.
Wow, that's fantastic.
She said, that was the proudest moment of my life. And I think as a parent, that's how I would feel too.
So it sounds like, it's easy for a coach to just get hyper-focused on their players, the wins and losses, but to look outside of that, that's where winning is going to come from, is if you take care of everything.
What happens is if the players feel that you're for them, they will give it everything for you. Mercenaries can win too. Let's face it. Johnny Wooden tells us that good coaches are one who win when they have good players. Some coaches lose with good players, and they should go in to do something else for a living. But it isn't just about winning. I remember one time Larry Miller getting mad at me when I said that some of my greatest games were losses. I can remember being at war with Pat Riley.
Yeah.
And we're playing, maybe the greatest team in the history of basketball, Kareem and Worthy and Magic Johnson and stuff. Who were we playing? And we'd give them everything they had, and that was great. Even when we lost a great series with them, seven games. Yeah.
Barely lost.
After it was over, I said to Pat, we were friends from even before being in coaching. He was from Brooklyn originally. People don't realize, and then he lived in the Albany area and then went to Kentucky. But I said, hey, Pat, was that fun? He says, it sure was. Somebody wins, somebody loses. I can live with that as long as you give it everything you got. And I wanted our players to leave us with the idea that we really did love them. And we used to hug. We had a ritual with the jazz players. We would hug, and we still do it when we see each other, and say, what can I do for you today, man? What can I do for you today? It isn't always about basketball. Basketball is a part of it. And, if you spread that into all walks of life and in everything we do, we try to get it. Patriotism starts like that. Patriotism starts with a handshake.
Yeah.
And that's what a salute is. A salute's a handshake, in the army and stuff like that. It's a hello, how are you? And I think we need more of that. I've also realized that just this kind of thing. How did the Jazz, if you ever saw my team stand for the Star-Spangled Banner, baby, you'd think they were at West Point.
Yeah.
And I said, unless any of you guys have a Congressional Medal of Honor, you stand at attention when they play that song and they have you honor our country.
Yeah.
Because that's the only thing, the only service you're giving, So don't give me a bunch of baloney,
Yeah. And I think it was in the little things that you did as a coach that really established that unity, right?
Well, you know what? You start with the small things. We didn't have a lot of rules, for instance. We had simple rules like be on time. We can't play without you, so you got to be here. All right? We wanted you to dress properly, be ready to play. I had one time a visiting player came in, he said, I heard the Jazz that every practice is like a game. Shirts tucked in, socks pulled up. I said, hey, we don't stop paying you because we don't have a game today. We pay you every day. And so that's what I expect. You come to work, just like a plumber. He brings his toolbox with him. You're ready to go to work. I'm only going to take a couple hours of your time. And so, isn't it funny that if we picked the best college coach in the country, I think it would be fair to say, most people would say Coach K.
Yeah.
At Duke is the best college coach. And maybe he isn't, but he certainly is going to be right up there with all his success. And then we pick the best coach in the pros. And we'd probably say it's Popovich. Isn't it funny that they're both products of military institutions? Popovich graduated from the Air Force Academy. And of course, Coach K went to West Point.
Yeah. So there's like those roots of leadership. Yeah.
Discipline. You can't lead unless you have authority. Authority comes from above, okay? Who were the best lieutenants? Those who worked under General MacArthur and General Eisenhower. And that's why so many of their cadre became generals later on. So you got to have authority, and you've got to have discipline.
Yeah.
And a school teacher cannot survive without the principal and the school board and everybody supporting them. Otherwise, the parents would eat them alive. And the parents are the outsiders. They're the amateurs. They don't know anything about what's going on unless they've been teachers themselves. So, yeah, you got to have discipline, and you got to have. I was very fortunate that all the coaching places I had that kind of authority. People supported me, And, it helps. If you don't have it, the players smell it, they realize it, and you don't stand a chance. You can start getting your retirement papers out.
So what did you do if there was a player? How did you approach it if they weren't really embracing that discipline culture that you were establishing?
Sit them down. Get rid of them. Yeah, I can't. I'm not running boys down. I don't want to affect the whole team. All right, in order to save one person. You know what I mean? I could make all my efforts. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that we see now that players who are making millions of dollars want more, and they're holding out, and they're this and that. You've got to move on, all right? And you cannot let one player drag you down, And my idea is that you're only as strong as your weakest link. And, you have somebody who's killing your locker room, who's going to be talking behind your back and everything else. I'll give you an example. We had a Thurl Bailey, all right, out of the great North Carolina team, and played for a very good coach, Jimmy Valvano. And, we were practicing, we were having preseason down at Dixie College, and we were at the first day of practice. And in those days, unlike now, you have about 18, 19 guys, some are trying to make the team along with your squad and whatever they're working out. Well, anyway, after the morning session, we were meeting out in the middle of the floor, and I usually kept everybody in front of me. I learned that in the Army. Don't let people surround you. But this day, I don't know, somehow some players got behind me, and all of a sudden, while I was talking, I heard, "Shut up! The man's trying to teach us to win." I turned around, and there's Thurl Bailey. He's yelling at a couple of rookies. He said, "These two rookies, they're talking to each other about where they're going to go for lunch in between the double sessions." And so I said, "Oh, we're going to have a good team this year."
Nice.
Yeah, because I said, he got it.
Yeah. That your leadership was being duplicated.
And everybody, because it resonated to all the players, even though he was yelling at two rookies, everyone in the line. Or, see you in the weight room up at one time up in the weight room up at Westminster where we used to practice, and we had put a weight room in there, and Carl Malone was in there, and the team was working weights and everything, and a couple of guys got up and they start walking, and all of a sudden they hear, "Hey," and it's Carl Malone, "Get back. You're not done yet. You'll be done when I'm done." Nice. And the guys go, "Yes, sir." And they go back and sit down. Yeah, that's first of all, those guys can do that because they already are on the team. They are already established and what have you. Sometimes the players will look at a coach who maybe has had losing seasons or is on the ropes himself, and they will recognize that. So, you have to have support, and you've got to have belief in yourself. I never worried about being fired, and I used to say to the players, "Don't talk to me about coaching, because I'm the coach. I'm the father here. You don't know anything. I know everything." And that's the end of that,
Yeah.
I mean, now they have 11 coaches. I need 11 coaches. Well, I need to teach a guy to shoot. I know everything there is to know about shooting.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to put it into the hands of someone else to teach you how to shoot. I'm going to work with you.
Yeah.
So, that's important too. So you've got to have, besides a loud mouth, you've got to have skills yourself.
Yeah.
The players have to believe. You're right. I thought Rich Kelly, a player who went to Stanford, was a brilliant student and everything. And Rich Kelly said one time when a reporter asked him, "What is the difference in other coaches you've had?" Because he had played in a couple of teams. He says, "Frank is an alchemist." He says he's able to blend things together. You've got to know who's the strongest. Vince Lombardi knew it. He knew that Bart Starr lost, I think, 10 games in the senior season. And he sometimes Bart Starr had confidence problems. So he knew to put an arm around him. Now, Hornig, on the other hand, was a kicker and a fullback and a tough guy and everything else. He needed a kick in the butt. So you got to know who to kick in the butt and who to hug.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes some people need a hug. Others need a kick. And, that's the way it is. Some players come in there and all they think about is failing. And you have to think about athletes who sometimes their whole lives, they're thinking about, "I've got to make it. I've got to make it. If I don't make it here, what am I going to do?" We haven't educated them. I find a lot of fault in schools who let athletes slide. We have to be tougher on them. All right. That's why I used to give them a bonus to go back and finish school. Get your degree. makes you one step above a lot of people by doing that. You know, that you show that, hey, I didn't just go to college, I graduated from college. And so, you know, you have to do that. And because, you know, the kids are afraid. I don't care who they are. Even a guy that's traded or a guy that's picked up in the draft, you know, they always worry about, you know, changing teams, the new neighborhood I'm going to, the new coaching staff, what are they going to think, and new teammates. And you always hear players say, this is my team. So don't tell me that. There's no team. We never, and Jerry didn't allow it either. We never allowed teams to have team meetings. We're on that team too. You know, and you're not smart enough to hold team meetings. You know, any more than I would have in the Army. Let my company have a meeting without me there. Yeah. You know, because I'm going to be out front when we hit the pay dirt. You know?
Yeah. Being very clear on who the leader is.
Oh yes.
I mean, that's
sometimes you have to tell them. Yeah. That's why they wear bars and stuff and stars. You know.
Yeah. So was it difficult at times to know which players needed a hug and which ones needed a kick in the pants?
Find it out pretty soon.
Yeah.
I would very often. You know, sometimes I look around the locker room and I just see somebody read their body language or their face, and then they say, well, what's the problem? You know, I had one time, it was Mark Eden, and I knew he was down in the dumps or something. He usually wasn't that way, you know. In fact, you know, surprisingly, the captains of our team would be in those days, Thurl Bailey and Mark Eden. You know, he was not best player. He was a great player, but not our best player. And he was the captain of the team, and his leadership qualities now, he goes out and speaks. He does a great job of leadership conferences and stuff. But anyway, I said, what's wrong, Mark? He says, well, I don't know how I can approach this with you. He said, but next Saturday, he said, my sister's getting married, and I was wondering if I could get a day off. Well, we had a game that day.
Oh wow!
So I said, Mark, I'll tell you how I feel about that. You should be at your sister's wedding. We got a lot of games, you know. And that's how I felt. Yeah. Later on, I had to run in with another player who said he needed a day off, and he was going to go. He was going to pick up his Rolls Royce, and he said, "I need a day off to go pick up my Rolls Royce." So he said, "You let Mark Eden have off." I said, "Mark Eden's sister was getting married. You're going to pick up a Rolls Royce." I said, "You better have your rear end on the bus ready to go." Yeah, I mean, you know, you find out. I used to do a pretty good job of reading, you know, and you know what you have to worry about sometimes? How about the player who knows he's being paid for his production numbers, you know, and so he has a bad day, but the team wins and he's not happy. Yeah. Or you lose and he had a great day and he can't get the smile off his face. You know, you have to slap that guy. You have to get after him, you know. Yeah. You have to tell him when you lose, we all lose. When you win, we all win. Yeah. And it's not, and also, Jerry knew this very well, is that winning is not a sometimes thing. Vince Lombardi said, you know, you don't start all of a sudden, we're going to turn it on day one. No, you started the first day of practice. And we want to win at everything. I mean, everything we do. Yeah. And I want to get the pretty girl. I want to get the seat on the bus. I want to get the extra piece of pie. I mean, that was my demeanor. Yeah. And that's how I got brought up, you know? Yeah.
It sounds like with a lot of your players, obviously there's a one-to-one relationship and connection there. What did you approach that in a more formal way where you'd have formal one-to-one meetings? Or?
You know, the authority figure, I don't believe in, I thought the players should call me coach, you know? I didn't care if they said to the press, Frank did this, or their mother, or their father, or their wife, or whatever it is. But when addressing me, I earned that position. I mean, to me, coach was like doctor, you know, and like I said before, my own high school coach, I still call him Mr. Drucker, my college coach, Mr. Gallagher. So Coach Gallagher. So, you know, that was about as formal as it ever got on that. They would always say, Coach Layden, can I see you? Even, you know, someone picks up the phone. Coach Layden, is that you? So but as far as sitting down to talk, I wanted the players to say, I have an open door. You're welcome to come in, but I'm not a priest. I don't want to hear any crying. I don't want to hear any confessions or anything else. I said, you got to have something that I can help solve for you. You know, otherwise you got to do it yourself because you're now a man. You're over 21. Yeah. And I said, now if you're in a jam or you need help or something, then yes. then we can do it. If you got to go to your sister's wedding or whatever it is, you need to borrow something. There's all sorts of ways of helping out. I had players come to me and say, I'm having trouble with my wife. We may get divorced, stuff like that. Then you should talk to Reverend Davis.
Yeah.
Whatever, Father O'Connor, whatever it is. And I said, they're better equipped to handle that. But I wanted them to feel comfortable with coming into me and saying, I got a girl pregnant or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and I'm in a jam here. All right, calm down. It seems like a jam now, but a couple of weeks we'll work on it. Or also car accidents, whatever it is. What the younger you are, sometimes these things seem like great tragedies that are unsurmountable. And yet you're the authority figure. You have the cards in your hand, so you can figure it out. And when you do this, the loyalty builds and the responsibility to you. I always felt it shouldn't be a one-way street, and it shouldn't be about just money. Anybody can throw money at them, but I'm going to have you feel that you want to be on this team because you like being part of this family. And that's what happened, that the people wanted to play for the Jazz. That's why so many of our players were here for so long and played for their whole careers.
Yeah.
Because this was a nice place to play. It was easy to get to. And we listened to them. I used to have not only the captains of the team, which was the captains dealt with the players, but I also had an executive committee. I had two players who were older players. For instance, I had Billy Paulson, Rich Kelly, two older veteran players with 10 years experience, who would come to me with inner problems. For instance, we had a player who couldn't read, and I had a book club, and he used to get the books, and he couldn't read and everything. So I said, well, let me talk to him. And this is sad because he had a degree from college. I won't say what college. They pushed him through. He couldn't read. Well, anyway, I got somebody up at the university, and a woman, a teacher up there, and she worked with him. And she said he could read, but he forgot he could read. He learned to read when he was a kid in Brooklyn,
Oh, wow.
And an African-American kid who was poor and everything. And he ended up being able to read, but he used to carry a book around with him and everything. But he couldn't read it, but he was trying to fool me because we had a little book club that we used to say on the plane. I used to say to the players, I want to see you guys reading, not just sleeping all the time and everything. And we'd meet and discuss Stephen King. We'd try to pick out books that they'd be excited about and everything, bestsellers. And so anyway, we tried to reach out to have them not be embarrassed to come to me with even the most delicate of problems that they had. It's difficult to say to somebody, I can't read.
Yeah.
And I'm the one person that can help them.
Yeah.
I said, we can take care of that.
Right.
Reading's easy. I said, and it's easier when you're older to learn, I said, than you are when you're a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, believe it or not, I went so far as to have people teach them to write.
Wow.
And a lot of the kids, they had some printing experience, but they couldn't express themselves on paper, let alone, you know.
And it became a team effort to help that player.
Spelling, writing. I mean, it seems crazy. But you know what? Aren't these things that happen in families?
Yeah. I
don't have the answers to everything, but I try to get them to feel good about themselves. And that went with, for instance, how to dress. When the Jazz traveled, I had an experience here that was interesting. When the soccer team first played, the Real Madrid was the world championship soccer team. And they had the great player, I can't think of his name now. He married one of
Beckham, right?
Beckham. He married one of the Spice Sisters or something like that. Well, anyway, we had a party for him up at the governor's house, and I was invited to go. And I was talking to their manager, to their coach, and everything. And he said to me, I said, you know what? I was impressed when you guys got off the bus. I said I was impressed at how you all were dressed alike and how dressed up you were and everything. He said, we are the New York Yankees.
Wow.
He says, that's how we are.
Yeah,
that's how we
culture.
travel. Yeah, and that's how we were. I said, we go to the airport, you'll go and see some pro teams, and the guys will, be dressed sloppy and stuff like that. I said, when we go and people say, that's the Jazz, I said, you didn't have to have a shirt and tie on all the time, but you should be dressed. You should be dressed because you are a professional.
Yeah.
And so, as lessons that maybe some people were afraid to tell them too.
Yeah. Yeah. So
to be honest with them.
As far as those one-to-one interactions, you expressed how your office was always open for them. Anything else that helped them feel more comfortable coming to you with some difficult problems?
Yeah, by paying them respect. I never fined a player money. I never took money from people. To me, that's the biggest disrespect you can ever be. Oh, we're going to fine this guy $1,000 or $100, whatever it is. All right. And the other thing is to treat them like men. I used to say, I'm going to treat you like a man until you prove to me you're not. I said, I do it the old Marine way. Guys were late for practice. What I used to do, and it was very effective, and you can do this with your children too, is that I didn't punish the guy who was late. I punished everybody else. So at the end of practice, when a guy was late for practice, I'd say, stand on the side. Everybody else on the lines would run suicides and keep running the suicides. Now, he was the one that was late, and he's not running them, but the team is, because in reality, he's punishing the team.
Yeah, doesn't want to let the team down.
Yeah, and see, so anyway, they learn, and so then that's taken care of in the locker room. The players will say, hey, never be late again.
Yeah.
I'm not running lines for you, man. And I always try to say, hey, I'll give you another chance, but don't wear my patience out, because like I said before, this isn't Boys Town. We're not trying to save you one person at a time.
Yeah.
But I think treating the players with respect and listening to them sometimes is just enough. And trying to teach them to don't be afraid to come in and share, and whatever it is isn't going to affect your standard on the team.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not going to put up with certain things. For instance, I say, when you take drugs, I will get all the help in the world, but I'm not going to have you on my team. Not while you're using drugs. Now, we knew for years players were using steroids, huh? It was new. All of a sudden in baseball, they're saying, oh, these guys are hitting homers. Well, weren't you a little suspicious when you saw the guy over one summer come back 25 pounds bigger and stronger and muscles and everything else? So what I tried to do was treat them with respect, unless they abuse that. And abuse would be by, like I say, drug usage or continuing drug usage. John, what's his name up here? John Drew. We gave him many, many chances and paid for his rehabilitation stuff, but he continued to let us down, and we had to let him go.
Yeah. So anything else as we wrap up? Any other leadership principle or coaching philosophy that was really a highlight in your approach to coaching?
I think that the players will read whether you like your job or not. When I measure, I think I mentioned before that Johnny Wooden said a good coach is one who wins when he has good players. Nobody can win with bad players. All right. The UB Browns of the world and stuff will make them a little better, the Pat Rileys, but otherwise you got to have good players. All right. But I think in leadership and in coaching, the players will read whether you enjoy it or not. And you've got to be very, very careful. I always say, would I want my son or daughter to play for this coach? Would I trust them? All right. I say this all the time. Football. I love football. I think football is great. I think it's great training for our kids. It's more lessons are learned on the football field as a classroom than in the classrooms themselves. You find out who you are. You learn fear. You learn, it's like the players waiting for a game. They're worried. They're scared. They're this. But then when the whistle blows and the kickoff, they get out there and they play or they don't play, whatever it is. And so, I think it's important to say that you're not going to be dangerous. I say to a lot of parents, when you let your son play football, make sure you know the coaches. You don't want some nasty guy that, I remember playing football in my day, and one of our punishments is they didn't give us water. What the, are you crazy? We could have killed us. Yeah. Practicing in the heat and, hey, you guys aren't going to have a drink, and thing. And then when I got in the Army, I found it was the opposite way. We made guys drink that water. We didn't want to lose them. So you have to be careful that the welfare, the health, the mental well-being of the player is at the utmost.
Yeah.
And the players will read that. The people around them will read that. And in the final analysis, maybe you won't be in the next Popovich or the next Johnny Wooden or whatever it is. But you gotta, when you get out of it, the players will read this too. Do you enjoy this? Do you have fun? A little trick I used, and I think it was good. I thought, always leave them laughing.
And you're good at that.
I used to always have a joke at the end of practice. And I used to say, if anybody can top my jokes, anybody come in. So the players started to come in with jokes. And they would tell a joke at the end of practice. And I would always look up a joke and have a little joke at the end of practice too. So that when we left practice, we were all, they were all hitting each other and high-fiving. Yeah, that was a good one, Yeah. To leave, I think it's good to leave practice, to leave work every day on a bright note. Don't leave. My father worked on the docks, and he worked on he was a longshoreman, and he carried stuff on his back and onto the ships and everything. That's what he did. Dumb Irishman. That's what they did with the Irishmen when they came from Ireland. They put them to work in there, as they did other groups of people too. And it was hard work, and it was tough work and everything else. So he always said, I got to go back to this job. I hate my job. I said, you got to go through life hating your job. You should love your job. And the players will read that. They knew I loved coaching. They knew I liked coaching. And I had to have them in order to make it work.
Yeah.
So they were just part of it. And a lot of times people ask me, do you miss coaching? All right. I've been out of coaching for a lot of years now. I got out of coaching in order to be with my family. I thought I had taken enough away from them. I had a son who played in college and played in high school. It was a captain of his college team. I saw 2 games in his whole life.
Oh, wow.
2 games. This isn't a dress rehearsal. We don't go through this thing. We don't get a chance to do it over again. That was Scotty, so I hired him to come with me and coach. And people said, oh, is he qualified? And I said, I really don't care. I'm married to his mother. That's all, But, the thing that, you gotta like your job. But when people ask me, do I miss coaching? I said, no, I miss playing. I was thinking about this last night, about the game today, which I can't wait for.
Yeah.
And I was saying, gosh, if I could only be young again, for what reason? To just play one more time.
Yeah.
If and I say that to the players, sometimes, the coaches will have me to speak to their teams, Gary Anderson does every year. He's back at Utah State. And I always say to them, hey, what you're going to do this afternoon, when you go out in the real world, General Motors don't have a team.
Yeah.
So you enjoy it, because this is one time only. Yeah. What these guys are going to do tonight, that's it.
Yep. Yep.
And so you got. So I miss that. I really do. I played football, baseball, basketball. I played basketball and baseball in college, and I really miss that thing. So what do you do instead? Well, we need umpires. Umpiring's great, and then coaching is a wonderful profession, and it's competition. And some of my great friends, came from the coaching ranks. And I just got an award, in fact, from the Coaches Association, which was wonderful, because when I saw the list of guys who were on the committee, boy, I teared up.
Yeah.
I said, gee, I didn't think they liked me. But nice. It should be fun.
Yeah.
It all should be fun. And then when it isn't fun, you got to get it. I saw Andrew Luck the other day said it wasn't fun anymore.
Yeah.
So he quit. That's right, because that's when you'll get hurt.
Yeah, for sure. So you'll have opportunity in the next week or two to speak at the BYU Management Society, the Moral and Ethical Leadership
sooner or
Conference.
later, everybody gets to speak to them.
Yeah. You're at the bottom of the list.
It's my fee. If they like my fee, it's nothing. I get another green Jell-O.
Nice.
That's how they do it,
Well, it's going to be, I look forward to that opportunity.
You know what it is?
Hear you.
It's a special group. All right. I say this because it's young, energetic, bright young men who are giving of themselves to help others. Next week, I'm going also to the Bishop's dinner. I go, but I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's good for me and it's good for my family. We found home.
Yeah.
And that's great.
And that segues to my last question is you alluded earlier that coming to Salt Lake, there was some spiritual aspect to it. And now looking back on it, how have you, your spirit?
All right. There's a couple of things happen. All right. I say a spiritual aspect to it. I say, I wonder if I was sent. All right. That I came here and added a balance to this community that maybe they didn't have before. If you look around, we've had some, wonderful, wonderful leaders in other faiths. I mentioned Franz Davis of the Baptist Church here, with the African-American community. And there's so many people that do certain things like that have made great impacts on the community and have been rewarded for it by the community. But one of the things that happens is when you come to a place like this, which is obviously a religious community, religion has a big impact on everything we do and everywhere we go and everything we say and do. But it made me a better Catholic. It made me more aware of my religion and my responsibility. I'm impressed with the commitment and the camaraderie and the family aspects and all of the things, whether it's through sports or BYU, there's so many things that make me think all the time about my religion and my responsibility to being a Catholic. And I think that's good, by the way. I don't think everybody should be Catholic. I don't think everybody should be LDS. I don't think everybody should be Muslim. But I think that everybody should have the same standards and the same way of doing things. When people talk about BYU, for instance, and the honor code, I went to a school like that. Niagara University is a Catholic university, and we had all sorts of rules and regulations and what have you. And they were always being debated as right and wrong and everything else. Well, it didn't hurt this guy. It gave me a standard by which to live by. And I think one of the great things is that the LDS Church does is the missionary thing. I always think about this whenever I see a guy who's there's two people. If anybody goes to Notre Dame and you meet them and you talk to them, within 10 minutes, they will tell you they went to Notre Dame. I don't care what it is, all right? They will say, oh, by the way, along the way, I went to Notre Dame. You know that, don't you? They're so proud, and that's so important to them and everything else. I think it's true of people who are in the LDS Church. They say, where'd you go on your mission? I had two fellas meeting, where'd you go on your mission? I went here in Brazil, this, that. And that's a wonderful thing. And you do the same thing with Marines, don't you? A guy's a Marine, he's a Marine for life. If he doesn't have it tattooed on his forehead, he has it somewhere along the line. He's going to let you know he was in the Marine. He's proud that he was able to do it, and he served. And I think that goes well with the missionary spirit. I think you become a missionary. You learn. You're teaching the religion, but you're learning. Every time you teach, you learn. Yeah. Leadership is not. By the way, I'll add this to it. It's not born. You're not born to be a leader any more than you're born to be a dentist. I don't want to have my teeth worked on a guy that was a born dentist. I want to have a guy work on my teeth who has worked hard at it. Yeah, but leadership can be taught. Leadership can be shown by example. I had I mentioned my father, 6th grade education, immigrant, comes over to works hard on the docks all his life and everything. But what an example he was, and his leadership qualities by his sacrifices, that when the time came to, when the bugle blew, we went, we didn't question it.
That concludes my interview with Coach Frank Layden. I hope you appreciated that interview as much as I did. I get people from time to time that tell me, yeah, you're a pretty good interviewer. And then I interview somebody like Coach Layden, and I have not one chance of controlling that interview as we go. But nonetheless, he's so fun to listen to. I really appreciated it. Now, as you can see, there's a lot of principles here that I felt like really applied to our experience as Latter-day Saint leaders. I'll just run through the ones that stood out to me, the main leadership principles that he talked about. I just want to give you my perspective and maybe give you a deeper opportunity to ponder over these principles. The first one that jumped out is always involve service in your leadership. And I'd love this, and it might seem like an assumption to make that if you're an Elders Quorum president, Relief Society president, well, of course, we're going to involve service in our leadership. But I think there's always ways to be maybe more intentional and realize or see that service as, we're coming together as a unit to serve and make the world a better place. And in that process of doing that, we're going to be more unified. There's going to be deeper friendships. There's going to be more of a community in our organization. So I love that. The next one that stood out is help them be better intellectually. I love this concept, especially in, coaching the NBA. You would think that, well, we're here, we got to win championships. We got to get some W's on the board, and march forward with creating success here. But really creating an organization that's not just about one thing, right? That we're not just here for wins, or we're not just here to bring people into Christ, which is incredibly important, right? But we're also here because we want to create maybe a quorum where every time you leave our quorum meeting or our Relief Society every week or our ward and sacrament meeting, you're leaving deeply impacted intellectually, right? And more challenged intellectually. And I think that's such a rich principle that can impact any organization. And obviously the one that comes up a lot is show you really do love them. And I saw that in many examples that Coach Layden shared. And how are you, think about the examples, they talked about this simple ritual they have of hugging each other and saying, how can I help you today, right? Like, what are some various rituals or routines that you can implement in your service or in your quorum routines and schedule that is going to give you an opportunity as a leader, but give everybody an opportunity one-to-one to show that you love each other, right? And that you really care deeply about each other. And it's not just, well, I'm assigned to this ward, and so that's why I'm here, right? Make your authority known and promote discipline was another principle that stood out. And obviously, coaching an NBA basketball team or just coaching in general, I think is a little bit different than, running an elders quorum or a Relief Society where, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that, you're screaming at people or telling them, to get in line or really push discipline like you're in the army. But I think there's some things that you could implement that could really stimulate that discipline and stimulate or recognize the authority, the keys that are present, and the role of those keys, right? That authority in the room. And so that'd be an interesting discussion. I would say for a presidency to have is to discuss, how can we make our authority more known? And obviously, it's not your authority; it's God's authority. How can we make priesthood keys more present, more obvious in the room, and turn to those and really create purpose for those rather than just on paper? Yeah, you're the elders quorum president. Yeah, you have keys, right? Next one is your leadership influence being duplicated? I love the story with Thurl Bailey, right? Where they were coaching and Thurl stopped everybody and said, hey, he's teaching us how to win, right? And so this is a good sign of healthy leadership is when there are organic leaders that just start cropping up in the quorum or in the group, in the organization that step forward and lead, even though they haven't been assigned to lead, or even if they're not a counselor or a presidency member, they still step up and say, we're doing something special here. And that's maybe another discussion to have is how can we duplicate our leadership influence? Next one is know when to give a hug and when to give a kick. These were some rich stories of that there are individuals where it's not that you go to their home and, cuss them out for not coming to church or these things. But, some people, they just need some extra love, and other people, they need you to go to their home and challenge them and say, Brother Jones, we expect you to be part of our quorum. We need you here. All right. We need you to renew that temple recommend. We need you to engage in our ward in the gospel because we need you. Right. And so I think there's various ways of doing that, giving them a kick in the pants, spiritually speaking, without offending or coming across too strong, but nonetheless, a great principle. Next one is just how he stimulated one-to-one relationships and really made that, his open door policy. But, and I think it's so much more than just saying, hey, I have an open door policy, but being a leader that's approachable. How are you approachable? Obviously, most leaders in the church or Latter-day Saint leaders don't have an official office, right? With a door that people can walk into. And so I think it's up to you to determine, well, when are your open office hours? Or if someone does want to talk to you, how would they go about that? And do they know how to go about that, right? I think as getting an appointment with a bishop is fairly obvious with an executive secretary and so forth. But what about with a Relief Society president? What if they really want to come to you with a concern or a trial that they're having in life? How would they go about that? Because it's probably difficult to wait around till the end of Relief Society and catch you as you're leaving or to show up your house. So implementing a system there as far as one-to-one relationships would be helpful. Next principle is help them want to be a part of the team. I mean, this is so crucial. How many individuals in your quorum, in your Relief Society, in your ward really want to be there? And how many are there just because, well, I know I should be, I got to take the sacrament but really to create an organization of them really wanting to be there. And that may be just taking the step of asking them, why on earth do you want to be here? I mean, I get the whole, ordinance thing. I get the tradition of it. But if all that was taken away, why would you want to be here among us and be a part of this group? appearance creates professionalism, and professionalism creates culture. I love this, and this goes back to I think the Yankees, the New York Yankees, have been doing this for years and years of just creating a professional atmosphere, right? And now, there's an eternal debate about white shirts and things, but I remember as a bishop, I would ask my bishopric counselors. I said, it's not in the handbook, but I would ask that you, every time you're on a bishopric business, that you're acting in that function, that you have a nice looking suit on, and that you're doing that. Right now, obviously there's service activities or just dropping in on somebody, but as far as Sunday to Sunday, when we're acting in our official capacity, I want a visual image of unity, not just in our actions, but visually. And I think there's, a lot of people, especially nowadays, it's easy to grumble about that sort of stuff. There's lots of discussion about the honor code at Brigham Young University and appearance at church and these things. And of course, those are important discussions to have. But in leadership, I really feel like it's important to take a step of how are we going to look professional and take it to that level so that the authority that we represent is respected in that manner. So something to think about, I think, as far as appearance, like how can you impact the appearance of maybe your presidency or the appearance of your quorum? It isn't going to feel like just one more thing, but it's going to actually stimulate unity among those that attend. Another fantastic principle that Coach Layden shared: those you lead will read if you like your role or not. I thought this was awesome because so many times in the church, especially a bishop, a stake presidency, 9 years. You're in these callings for a long time. And sometimes those last few years, you're just sort of ready, right, to move on to something else. And so if people can perceive, if you're not enjoying that calling, and I have enjoyed some callings before, especially some leadership callings that I've had. And I feel like people really felt that. Like when I'm acting in that capacity, they could tell I was enjoying that experience. And if you enjoy that experience, they are more likely to want to be a part of that experience and be involved and be in that group. So that's another thing to consider. Do you like your calling? And if you don't, what can you do to either stimulate and find that energy again, or maybe have a conversation with your bishopric or somebody and say, man, I'm really struggling with this. Is there something else? Or what can we do to stimulate some of that enjoyment in your calling? Because you really do need to enjoy your calling. And then lastly, I put always leave them laughing, end on a positive note. And this is, I think, great counsel for any quorum meeting, relief society meeting. Of course, it's natural to sort of end the meeting with the testimony, right? The spiritual experience where your voice lowers and you get very sincere and I just love this gospel, right? And that's fine. There's a time and a place for that. But also, especially in an elders quorum, I would much rather, as in a group of men, to leave that meeting laughing or leave it on a note that's super positive and that leaves me smiling as I walk out of that quorum room, right? So I think that's a great principle. Anyways, those are just the main principles I took away from it. I hope I'd love to hear maybe principles that you have that captured your attention in this interview. You can go to leadingsaints.org, and right on the interview of this with Coach Layden, you can leave a comment, and there you can share your perspective on things. And that concludes this throwback episode of the Leading Saints podcast. Quick reminder, go watch Joseph Grenny's presentation on helping loved ones overcome addiction by going to leadingsaints.org/14.
It came as a result of the position of leadership which was imposed upon us by the God of heaven, who brought forth a restoration of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And when the declaration was made concerning the only true and living church upon the face of the earth, we were immediately put in a position of loneliness, the loneliness of leadership, from which we cannot shrink nor run away, and to which we must face up with boldness and courage and ability.